Welcome to our lecture about internet security, about weaknesses and targets. This is the second lecture about weaknesses of the internet protocols. We are in the main chapter of this lecture series here and are already reached this point. We discussed that it is possible to misuse, to break into an IT system, to misuse some functionality on very different level. We started with discussing human factor and technical failures. We discussed how one can get information about implementation details from the TCP/IP stack that is used, from the operating system that's used, and this type of reconnaissance attacks gives the attacker the possibility from outside to detect details of victim systems and to prepare attacks. We have discussed accounts and passwords, attacks on accounts and passwords, and now we are discussing how the Internet protocol stack, how the TCP/IP protocol stack can be misused for bad purpose, can be misused to break into a system, can be misused for denial of service attacks. In the beginning, it's important to say why the Internet protocol stack does not provide so much security features. We discussed already in the first lecture about weaknesses of the Internet protocols, about spoofing, a very simple but very powerful method to overcome security controls in a network and to do some bad things. There's a simple explanation. In the beginning, when the Internet protocol suite was designed, it was an experiment. It was an experiment to find out whether it's possible to connect networks run with different technologies, to bridge them and to provide a feeling for the user that this interconnection of different networks behaves like a uniform network. So this was the idea of the TCP/IP protocol stack, so they had to fight with many functional things. So security mechanisms were not considered to be important, because for such an experiment within the community of computer scientists, functionality, this was what the people want to develop, what our colleagues want to find out. So the idea was, when we have found out how to run such an internet, then we can do it in a perfect way, and then we have to think also about security features. So the use of internet in that form for commercial use, for e-government, for online banking, so for types of services that definitely need security, was not foreseen. So this was so successful experiment that internet nowadays provides a global communication platform. So this security leaks in the internet protocols provide a new way for attacker to attack computer systems, networks of companies, of persons. Besides of these flaws in the design of the internet protocols, on all levels of the protocols of the TCP/IP protocol level, there are some other problems, some other mechanisms that cause some problems. So one is connected to this Internet Protocol version 4, this protocol that was designed for experimenting whether it's possible to run such internet networks. So the address realm is small. You know, in the last years, the free available addresses run out. So there is time to finish this experiment and to restart internet on the basis of the new protocol, the IPv6 protocol. There's another problem that completely changed in the last years, how internet is used. More and more in the center of using the internet is to transport and to receive multimedia data, real-time data, videos, audios, and other things. But in the original design of the internet protocols, this was not foreseen. So there were no possibilities to prioritize such real-time data and support the transmission of that type of data. Then there are only very limited possibilities for encryption and authentication. We will see a different example where this is a problem. And also other things very early brought people to find out that a new internet protocol is needed. So they start already in the 19th last century's development of this new internet protocol, next generation, the IPv6 protocol, that provides various solutions to some of the flaws we will discuss, but also some security problems have to be solved by separate systems that cannot be solved on the protocol level. Meanwhile, of course, internet works quite well also for e-business in online banking. And this is possible thanks to the development of powerful routers, of powerful firewall systems, which are able to fix several of the security leaks of the TCP/IP protocol, protocols, but some weaknesses still remain. Besides the inherent security problems of the protocols themselves, there are other serious weaknesses that may be misused by attackers for attacking IT systems over internet protocols. And this is possible. In the first lecture, we discussed attacks on the IP layer. Today, we will concentrate on attacks on the transmission control layer, on the application layer. So on all the protocol stack layers, it's possible for attackers to misuse something to create an attack around. But beside of these inherent mistakes, there are also other problems that support attackers, that help attackers, that they can perform an attack. For example, like the configuration errors in systems, in firewall systems, in routers. So even if the routers and firewalls provide means to secure against such attacks and to overcome some security leaks, if it's not correctly configured, then it does not help so much. Also, port filtering is an important security tool. So, and if it's done in an incorrect or an incomplete way, then it opens doors for attacks and attackers. Then there are active ICMP options. We discussed this in the last lecture, that this Internet Control Protocol provides some features to interact with an internet and to create some problems, for example, to drop down speed, transmission speed, or others. Routing tables, influencing routing tables, not carefully designed routing tables. Also, this provides possibilities for attacker. I remind you on the attack where the attacker was able to influence the cache of a router, so that, not the cache, so influencing the router himself, so that all the packet transport is done over attacker's station and others. There are many other things that influence the secure run of an IT system that's interconnected with the internet protocols. But what is important is to understand that on all the different layers of the TCP/IP protocol stack, it's possible to misuse something to damage the network, to perform a denial of service attack or others. So the security leaks of the TCP protocol are often used to attack the protocol of the application layer. So the attacks on the internet level, these are not done for themselves. They are used as a mean to attack application. The application contains interesting data. The application do something, provide services or others. So the attacking the internet protocol is a way to attack the applications on the application layer itself. For example, attacking the file transfer service or the domain name service, email service, or others, but also to attack the applications that are using the internet for their communication. There are, for such attacks, two main goals. The one main goal is to break into a network for receiving secret data, for getting access to certain resources. And the other way is to influence the services that are provided by the system. So to eliminate such a service or to paralyze services completely. And these are the so-called denial of service, the DOS attacks. So these are the main goal. These two are the main goals for attacking system. Let's start with a look to the attack scenarios. Attack scenarios on IP layer are IP spoofing, are ICMP attacks, routing attacks, ARP attacks, IP fragmentation attacks, and IP bombing. Here, about these attacks, we discussed in the last lecture weaknesses of internet protocols in the first lecture. And this is what we are going to discuss today, is attack scenarios on the transport protocol layer. So, for example, attack scenarios against TCP. There we will discuss SYN flooding, TCP sequence number attacks, the abort of TCP connections, takeover and hijacking of TCP connects, and then there is a second protocol on the transport control layer, the UDP protocol, and as an example for attacks against the UDP protocol, we will discuss UDP spoofing. And then we shortly discuss scenarios, attack scenarios against SSL and TSL, the protocols that are invented to secure the communication on the transport control level. So here we will discuss man in the middle attacks on SSL and TSL. And then we have attacks on the most upper level of the protocol stack, on the application layer. Here there are a number of application protocols, and each of these protocols has security weaknesses. To give some examples, we will discuss about attacks on domain name service. We will discuss attacks against email systems, telnet attacks, FTP attacks, and attacks on voice over IP protocols. The attacks on the web server, we will do in a separate or in two separate lectures. We will do this in the lecture Weakness on the World Wide Web. So let's start with discussing a few examples of attacks against the TCP protocol. And the first example of an attack we want to discuss is the SYN flooding attack. And the SYN flooding attack that makes use of weaknesses in the implementation of the TCP protocol. The problem here is that you remember TCP protocol insists that in a first step a connection is established. And the connection was established by means of a handshake, a three-way handshake protocol. And the idea here of the attack is that the data of a half-opened TCP connections are stored over a certain period of time. And if the attacker now tries in a very short time period to establish very many TCP connections, so system breaks down because resources that are needed for establishing such a connection are run out. Here is an attack scenario. in a very short time, in a rapid sequence, a large number of connection requests are sent to victim system without finishing the connecting protocol. So only the first part of the handshake is performed, and in this way, the victim systems allocates resources up to a moment. No more resources are available, and then one comes into a phase of instability. Even breakdowns can be initiated in this way. You know, the three-way handshake is there is a SYN package sent, the SYN package is acknowledged, and then the SYN package is sent from the victim, and then it would be needed to answer this, and then both sides have a connection established. But instead, the victim, the hacker, do not want to establish a connection. He wants, he forces the victim systems to allocate data, to allocate resources, not data, that are connected for storing data that are connected to the connection that should be developed. And if no more resources are available, then system breaks down. This was true in former implementation of the TCP IP protocol stack. Nowadays, only established the complete data structure after receiving the first data package. So what are possible methods to secure, to protect against the SYN flooding attacks? One is to decrease the time interval. So this was an earlier release of the memory, so that it's not possible when the time span is too long, the interval is too long, too many requests for establishing connections can be done. Then another method to secure, a protection method against such TCP SYN flooding is if a certain threshold value is reached, only a short hash value will be stored to identify a connection, not the full package. There are more protection methods. One can work with SYN cookies. The idea to allocate resources is to remember that system that wants to establish a connection. And in modern implementation, this is done by so-called SYN cookies. So here is the server replies with a special generated sequence number. It's an MD5 signature for timestamp, sender received address, port, random challenge key to identify the sender of this request later. So the server does not allocate memory for the half-open connections. He only sends this the SYN cookie to the client. So and then the client, when he receives the acknowledgement from the server, then the client responds with a sequence number that's based on on a certain sequence number here. That's based on the sequence number that is sent in the handshake. So in this way, it is necessary. It is not necessary to allocate the resources during the establishment of during the handshake protocol, the establishment phase of the connection. It can be done if this handshake is completely finished. So the server gets back from the client this sequence number, SEC prime, validates the SEC prime, checks the MD5 signature. Here's the information that are produced, that are encrypted in the hash, the timestamp, the sender, the receiver, and others, before it established and provides the space and the memory for this connection. So usually, server can, in this way, detect and can prevent such SYN flooding attacks in the moment he is not responding with a SYN ACK packet. So this was a traditional method. It was very dangerous in former times, but the new implementation of TCP, there is no more possible to run this SYN flooding attacks. But you know, in the internet, everyone is free, so many old systems are connected to the internet that are run also with such old TCP implementation. Next family of attacks I want to introduce and to discuss are the so-called TCP sequence number attacks. And this is really one of the most dangerous and efficient methods to overcome IT security systems, and which will and it is successful and works for such systems, for such IT security systems that only validate IP addresses of a sender. And this is typically the way how packet filtering is performed. So firewall systems that are only based on packet filtering, that are only check IP addresses, they are vulnerable against that TCP sequence number attacks. And the reason why it's successful is that there is a leak, a security leak in the Internet Protocol. And what's interesting, this leak is well known since '85. So almost 30 years one knows, and nevertheless, the attack can be run also today. What is the idea? We have in the TCP connection the TCP handshake. So TCP handshake is run before TCP connection is established, and it's run to establish such a TSP connection. And it has mainly two tasks. The one task is to establish the connection, and the other task is to confirm two sequence numbers that are important during the sequence communication, because this helps to explain exactly what packet follows to what other package. To understand this, let's assume we have a client A and a server B, and how this handshake is run. Handshake is run in the way you remember from the lecture about techniques of World Wide Web, that A starts, the sender starts to send a data package to B, which has a SYN flag and which sends a sequence number, an initial sequence number. The initial sequence number of the client A. So the sequence number is insofar important because this helps to provide the functionality of a connected-based service, because B has to show A that B has received this sequence number. So B answers, this was the first message, then message B to A is first, okay, I am willing also to establish a connection. So the synchronization bit is sent, and then the own sequence number, the sequence number of B is transmitted. And then there is a third part of this message is the acknowledgement of the sequence number of A. Typically, it's the sequence number +1, or it can be the sequence number itself, so that B proves A that it got the sequence number. And now the final step is that A finishes the handshake by acknowledging the sequence number of B, so that also B knows A got my sequence number. So during the further communication, then all new sequence numbers are acknowledged depending according to the initial number. Then it's counted up in a certain way. Often the number of bytes that are transmitted lead to a new sequence number. So the original sequence number help the both partners in the communication to exactly see what kind of packets are sent or what packages are lost. So what are the methods to select the starting sequence number? If you know the starting sequence number, then you can you know how one sequence number after the other is determined. From outside, it looks like random, randomly chosen. And this would be the best, a randomly chosen sequence number. But the random sequence number generators are expensive. So RFC 693 determines, it should be determined in the following way. There is a 32-bit counter, and this counter is increased by 1 for the last significant bit every 4 microseconds. So from outside, it looks very random because the start of a new, of an establishment of a new connection can be in an arbitrary point in time. Now, this is what the RFC says, and it's quite secure. But then, what was done in the implementation? So in the Berkeley TCP implementation, they increment not every 4 microseconds, they increment every second. So now it becomes more and more considered to be determined and not randomly chosen. So for a new connection, the value 64 is used. Within a connection, the value 128 is used. What is the problem? If an attacker knows an existing sequence number, he can predict with high probability the initial sequence number for a new connection. From a known sequence number, one can predict the new initial sequence number. If it would be random determined, it would be completely impossible. If it would be done very careful, then it would be almost impossible. But if it's done in such a lazy way, then one can predict. And exactly this is where the TCP sequence number attack is based on. Here's the attack scenario. The attacker X initiates a connection from an arbitrary sender address to a harmless TCP port, for example, to TCP ports 25 or 79 of victim system Z. So he starts to establish the connection. He sends a SYN flag and his sequence number. Then victim's system Z answers with SYN flag with its own sequence number and acknowledges the sequence number of X. And now the attacker simulates the identity of another internal system A. We have seen that by means of IP spoofing, such thing is possible. He simulates the identity of an internal system A and established a new connection now to a critical TCP port, for example, the login server. So he sends under the wrong name, under the faked name A, the SYN flag and the sequence number. Then victim's system answers with SYN flag, with its own sequence number, and acknowledge the sequence number of X. Now, this information is sent to A. The attacker, this was a faked address. So the attacker here, the attacker system, has the outside number Z. So this sequence number that's essential for finishing the establishment of a connection cannot be seen by Z. And exactly here comes the point that Z make a guess. Because before it knows this number, and now with high probability, he can guess what is this number. And then, although the starting sequence number is not sent to Z, so Z has no chance to see, it's sent to the faked address. He can calculate, can forecast this sequence number the attacked system has sent to A. And then he can finish the TCP, the establishment of the TCP connection to the critical port by acknowledging this guessed number. And if the guessed number agrees with the real number, then a connection is established, TCP connection is established between Z and A without that A contributed anything. That victim systems now assumes to have a secure connection to an internal station A, and the attacker knows this, and now attacker uses the identity of A, and he can eventually execute arbitrary or even dangerous operations. One problem remains to be solved for the attacker. The connection is not established between the victim system and the attacker system. The secure TCP connection is established between the attacked systems and A. So Z needs to get access to the internal station A, or to the communication between Z and A. But for some purpose, this is not so important to exactly know what send is sending. So even when attacker X only roughly knows the starting sequence number, this success is useful. Why? Perfectly guess is difficult, but he can make a lot of guess. When he sends the TCP SYN packet with a spoofed internal IP address from station A, then the attacker transmits a series of packages to the victim system with slightly variated guessed sequence numbers. So the victim rejects all packets with the wrong TCP, with the wrong sequence number, but he accepts the correct one. What are protection measures against TCP sequence number attacks? First, the protection measure is to deploy an efficient input filter. So configuring filter packets in such a way that data packets that come from outside, that are received in an external port, and have an internal IP address, that these packets are not forwarded. Because this is a spoofing idea. So the attacker is outside. So if the system is the filter is carefully configured, it can see whether a packet with an internal address arrives in an external port. And it can conclude that this is a kind of spoofing attack, so these packets are dropped. This is one method. Another protection measure against TCP sequence number attack is that authentication should not only be based on IP addresses. It's too less. Because IP addresses, sender addresses, can easily be faked. This was the basis for this spoofing addresses. So what is recommended to use a crypto system for user authentication? So after establishing a connection, an authorized client receives an encrypted session key from the authentication server to establish a unique connection to the destination server, like with the SSL, the TLS interconnection. When it's done encrypted, then it's completely useless, even if someone is able to break in. And then, of course, for the implementation, if the sequence numbers would be really randomly selected, then guessing would not provide to success. So use real random generators to determine the starting as the initial sequence numbers. I come to another family of attacks against TCP connections, and this is so-called TCP sequence. No, these are the hijacking or canceling TCP connections, and these both are simplified TCP connection number attacks. One can use this TCP number attack to cancel a TCP connection between two systems or to take over this. In both cases, one can create, in the first case, one can create a denial of service problem for the users. In the other case, one can try to get some insights into the communication. So let's start with the first attack scenario, that is the simple denial of service attack. So during an active connection between two systems, the attacker sends with a spoofed address a FIN flag or a RST flag to victim system. So if he's able to do this with the right sequence number, the victim system cannot distinguish whether it comes from the real partner or whether it comes from the attacks. So if it comes earlier than, if the packet with this number comes earlier than the packet from the real partner, then victim system decides now a connection is finished and start to close the connection. And the point to be successful again is to jump in with the right sequence number. The second attack scenario is a little bit more sophisticated, and it helps to hijack a TCP connection. Here, the attacker takes over an existing TCP connection by sending ordinary data packets to victim systems, problem with the correct sequence number. And if the packet with the correct sequence number receives victim systems, he takes this as the next packet in the connection. And in this way, when the packet with the sequence number comes from the real partner, then this is ignored. So in this way, if this was the original connection here between A and B, and in this way, Z jumps in, and then the connection is done in this way. And again, the key is to come with the correct, to send packages in the right moment with the right connection number. Then if the real packets of the attacker, if the faked packets of the attacker reach victim systems earlier than those of the real system, of the real partner, they will be accepted and will be proceed, and not the packages from the real partner. When the connection is an ASCII transmission, like in case of telnet or remote login, the attacker can execute commands with the rights of the deactivated user. So there is an early phase of authentication, and if so here, for example, establishing a connection, then authentication, and then they start to proceed in the assumption that there is a real proof that A communicates with B and B communicates with A, and then if that is able to jump in, that gets all the rights that A has. After there are some sophisticated systems, after abusing, some of this hijacking program, of this hijacking tools, resynchronize after a while B and A, so that they do not become aware that the connection was hijacked. And this is done by sending packets with the right sequence numbers. What are protection measures against canceling and hijacking TCP connections? First is, if data are encrypted that are communicated via such a TCP connection, then even hijacking does not occur any danger, because attacker cannot understand the content of the package he is receiving after hijacking the connection, because the packages are encrypted. Let's have a short look to the other protocol on the transmission control level. That's the UDP protocol. So you remember the UDP protocol compared to the TCP protocol is really simple. It's very simple, and it's only used for some technical messages. It has no security measures. There is no connection establishment or others. It is merely a port switching. So communication partners of an UDP transmission should generally classify it to be untrustworthy, because there is no mean to trust in this communication, neither in the sender's address nor in others, because it could be, all these packages could be very simply, in a very simply way, faked. So one attack I want to discuss here in the context of the UDP protocol is UDP spoofing. Here, by means of an UDP data packet with a falsified internet address, mainly simply by IP address spoofing, an attacker simulates again an internal host and uses relevant applications that may be used only by internal users, but with this faked address, UDP address, it's considered as an internal user. UDP hijacking or UDP active UDP sniffing. Here, an attacker can hijack existing UDP services. It's much more easy than hijacking TCP connections. This was quite sophisticated because TCP connections are based on an established connection. Here, UDP is mainly IP communication with an additional UDP port. So the server application has no chance to notice whether it's a faked or whether it's a real partner. Protection measures here against this UDP attacks, since simply on any exposed system, UDP protocol should be avoided completely. One has to do this carefully, because some services, some control message, for example, for real data, for real media data, for real-time data, use UDP for interchanging some control information. I mentioned that's also possible to attack TLS. That's a standardized version of the SSL protocol. So TLS is a transport layer security protocol. This is designed to provide privacy in internet communication. You are using it if you are using online banking, if you are using online shopping. It was designed based on the SSL protocol, so it makes impossible that the content communications become aware to a third party. It prevents eavesdropping, tampering, message forgery or others. And the key to do this, the method to do this, is cryptography. All the communication is done in an encrypted way. The TLS version, the Actel, is version 1.2. It is characterized and described in RFC 2546. It is a successor of SSL. SSL, this was a secure layer protocol. It's a secure socket layer protocol. And this was originally developed by Netscape and released in a version 2 in 95, in a version 3 in 96. And this was a version that then was standardized and renamed as TLS 1.0. So the TLS protocol starts again with a TLS handshake, and TLS handshake for negotiating the key and the algorithms that are used for encryption and authentication. So here TLS uses the X509 certificates. On the basis, this negotiation is done on the basis of X509 certificates, and then the encrypted session using negotiated master key MS. This is a master key. So, and what is dangerous and what kind of attacks are known against the TLS SSL protocol? And again, these are the man-in-the-middle attacks. And here the idea is the following. As man in the middle, the attacker can intercept messages in the TLS handshake and modify them in a way that two encrypted tunnels are created. This is exactly the idea. Instead of having A to B, a connection, when they start to intercept, the man in the middle, the hacker, plays in the middle, and then he makes a TLS connection between B and H, and on the other side, a TLS connection is established, TLS between H and A. So both H and B are thinking that there is a secure channel between A and B, and in reality, the attacker was able to place in the middle, to play against B the role of A, and to play against A the role of B. Because the attacker sees all the messages B is sending, and then he can encrypt it in the way that A is thinking it comes from B, and vice versa. But what is dangerous, H can not only see encrypted, can not only see messages, both of the communication partner are thinking that these are encrypted, it can also modify these messages and encrypt the modified message in the right way. So the idea here is to place in the middle, and in the moment when A and B want to negotiate to establish a TLS connection, then H plays in the middle and discuss with B about establishing a TLS connection and plays against B the role of A. And on the other side, it established a TLS, a secure TLS connection to A by playing the role of B. So the attacker, to do this, needs to forge the SSL certificate. And this can be done, for example, by exploiting weakness in the hash algorithm that's used in the MD5 algorithms. If you are interested in more details, here is the URL of this problem. So in this way, attacker is able to play the role of A in the communication with B, and is able to play the role of B in the communication with A. So user can, this is also a problem, that sometimes user accept wrong certificates. So you know there is shown something, do you, unknown certificate, do you accept? And then typically user says yes, because he wants to communicate and want not to be disturbed by stupid error messages. So here you see, when we speak about security, that it's very important to think about understandable error messages, certificate messages, and usability. So the attacker, in this way, if it works in this way, he can read all the messages in clear text, although A and B believe that all the exchange messages are encrypted. There are many other man-in-the-middle attacks possible. For example, TLS renegotiation attack that allows an injection of Jews and plain text prefix into the encrypted data stream. And this can be done often without detection by either the one side nor the other side. So what are protection measures against such really dangerous TLS SSL attacks? They are dangerous because both partners, both original communication partners, trust that they have an encrypted, secured, private connection. The first protection measure to mention is decreasing the possibility that an attacker is able to become a position as a man in the middle. And this can be done by preventing ARP spoofing, by preventing DNS spoofing, by preventing ICMP redirects, but these are the means which help the attacker. We already discussed all these attacks, because these attacks help the attacker to become a man. It could be also a woman in the middle. Same is true for RIPE attack. Then another protection measure is the careful check of certificates. And here the user awareness play an important role. So the error messages, the nowadays error messages are immediately deleted by 99% of the users. Because the users do not understand what happened in the background. They are not aware that these are the important thing to secure their connection. So the awareness to identify wrong certificates, that needs to be raised, and because it's much easier to get a wrong certificate accepted than to forge, to make use of the MD5 vulnerability. And then one should use secure hash functions. So instead of the SHA-128, the better SHA-512. So this is the length of the hash value, and as more long, the more secure. So these were a few attacks on the transmission level of the TCP/IP protocol stack. Now let's have a look to the application level and start with DNS attack. So DNS attacks are usually performed to prepare some subsequent break-in. And the break-in by following such a DNS attack typically are a misuse of remote services like RSH, RLogin, or others. Let's discuss a few attack scenarios for such DNS attacks. So the first attack scenario is that the attacker modifies this table of victims' domain name system, this in-address ARPA table. And this is what assigns the domain names to the IP addresses. So that one of the domain names for a trusted host, which attacker wants to simulate, is assigned to the attacker's IP address. So manipulation of the table which assigned domain name to IP address, and instead that the domain name of a trusted host is assigned to the right IP address, it's manipulated the table that it shows to the attacker's system and assign his or her internet address. This attack will be blighted if relevant remote application services double check the internet address in the opposite direction. So by not resolving domain name to internet address, but also asking what is the domain name to this internet address. So performing this double check. So if the assignment, this address is, this domain name shows to the wrong IP address, and you send back the IP address, then you do not have this other direction. However, even this can be, even this is not enough. So the discovery of the attack can be revealed by a back check. So the second attack scenario takes this into account and tries also to show wrong information in the backcheck. So here the attacker modifies, in addition to the in address RPAR table, also the DNS cache, so that authentication of his internet address also resists such a backcheck. What are the prevention measures? Yeah, authentication should be based neither only on IP addresses or on domain names. There should be another mean to authenticate a partner for communication. The second goal of the domain name of attacks against the domain name system are the so-called Zoon data. The Zoon data delivers an attacker a valuable information about the design and the structure of all the victims' networks and the addressing that's used in this network. So here the prevention method is to allow to access the Zoon data. This is possible via TCP port 53, exclusively to the restricted secondary DNS server, or the secondary DNS servers. Here is a picture about this. So the question is, this internet address belongs to what domain name? So it's sent to the domain name service. Domain name service find out, okay, this IP address is connected to the SEC host.com domain name, and then with the SEC host domain name, the remote service can be started. RSH, RLogin. Then, before working, this remote service can double check the SEC host is a domain name. So what kind of IP address is second host.com? And then the forward zone database of the domain name server that gives back the IP address that's connected to this domain name. And now there is a possibility here to compare these two. These two IP addresses need to be the same. And then you see here also to prevent such a double check, you have also to influence the domain name service cache. This is what attackers try to do to get assigned, to get their own IP address, attacker's IP address assigned to a domain name of a trusted system. Here is another family of attacks. These are attacks against email system. Remember, the email protocol is a SMTP protocol. This was a protocol that's used by the message transfer agents in the email system. Also here, we have the problem that the sender address cannot be verified. That's so easy to fake emails. The same problem, the sender, because it's not needed for the, not really needed for the communication. So people were not thinking about what kind of security measures can be placed to allow the receiver to find out whether the sender address was correct or not. Some other security problems that have been discovered concerning to the email system are based or are connected to the Unix implementations of the SMTP daemon sendmail. So there were a lot of failures in this implementation, but in many places the sendmail is in place. So prevention methods are a trustworthy identification of emails, but since it's not possible on the level of the protocol, one needs additional infrastructure, and these are such public key infrastructure, and then one can ask for electronic signatures of an email, and on the basis of that, one can really authenticate, trustworthy authenticate the sender of an email. So if you lose a pretty good privacy system or other system to secure your email system, then you have the chance to trustworthy identify the sender of an email on the protocol level, this is impossible. There are some other attack methods based on email service. So these are MIME and PostScript attacks. These are attacks by viruses, Trojan horses, on the application content layer. About some of them we already discussed. Here is the picture. We have the user agent which want to exchange emails. And they are using here the internet and sending the emails via such message transfer agents with the SMTP protocol through the internet. And here at the end, the communication is done with POP3 or IMAP. But the problem here in the middle is that the sender information is not secure. Let's have a look to another application, only to give you some parade of some examples. Let's have a look to another application of the internet and internet service, the telnet. Telnet protocol is based on transferring plain text, ASCII sequences. So all transmissions of telnet connections are performed in plain text, even user identity and password. So if one controls the internet, if one gets access, and if one filter a packet with identity and password information, then the attacker can misuse can use the telnet account of the person with a stolen identity. So first attack scenario is the following. Place a monitoring program like Wireshark, Ether, EaseLoad, SNIF, Snoop, or others into the network, and this enables the attacker to read all telnet messages, because these telnet messages are done. These telnet messages are all in ASCII to plain text, so it's easy to filter out when the packages with login information and password information. This attack is particularly effective if the monitoring program is installed not only on a simple host. If it's installed on the network backbone, then you can see immediately all the passwords, all the communications, control all the communications, and filter out passwords. A second attack scenario is the following. Here is the attack scenario for telnet attacks. So here the attacker replaces client's telnet application by a Trojan horse. And this Trojan horse records user identification and passwords and saves this data and sends it back without knowledge of the victim. We already had this example when we discussed about Trojan horse. It looks like an user identification window, but in particular in reality, it is shown by a Trojan horse that steals in this way, in a very simple way, identification and passwords. So prevention methods here are the use of efficient authentication mechanisms. You see in all this not only encryption for hiding the information, for encrypt the information so that it's difficult for attackers to get access. An even similar important problem is to find out who is my partner and to have efficient authentication mechanisms. And we mentioned this and discussed this. So, for example, one-time passwords are a good choice. Here's a picture for this telnet attacks. We have the two telnet clients that want to use the telnet service. And here is, for example, a Trojan horse placed, so that when the user gives in his password, his user identification, the Trojan horse steals this and send it back to the attacker, so that the attacker next time can use this account and password for using Telnet. Or by means of a sniffer program, one can eavesdropping all the traffic, and one can filter keywords like a username or passwords to filter out information and steal this. There are many applications in the internet. Let's have a look to the file transfer protocol. I claim that all these application programs that all have weaknesses or can be misused, or there exist known attacks based on these services. So if we look to FTP, the file transfer protocol, this provides a series of attack points. Remember, for data transfer, FTP needs two synchronously active TCP connections, one for the data and for transmission of the data, and the other for the control information. And these transmissions are established with different ports, with neighbored different ports. So hence, it cannot be uniquely determined over which port an FTP transmission will process, which makes it difficult to implement an FTP service behind the firewall. The server uses the privileged port, typically 21, for data connection and has therefore to be started as root. So a simple protection measure is to prevent such type of FTP attacks is to only allow passive FTP. There are more attack points. So over years, many security leaks were discovered in very different FTP server programs, which make it very easy to break in. Here are some examples. So for example, implementation mistake in this widespread FTP server program of Washington University, the WUFPD, allows to obtain super user rights. Super user rights after inputting the command site exec on a telnet connection on FTP port 21. Because for FTP, to run FTP, the server, one needs this super user rights. And it's a simple way the attacker can get super user rights. There are more mistakes and reasons and possibilities to attack FTP and FTP services. There are errors in the many errors in the configuration as anonymous file server. So here is a picture about this, to remind you of the FTP service. We have the FTP client, we have the FTP server, and this is a data connection, this is a control connection that needs to be used. Here, the server is the port 21. For the data connections, the port 20, and for the control connections, the port 21. Here in the client system, 2 free ports are used, and then this established 2 connections is possible to run the FTP service. What are the most important protection measures? Protection measures against attacks on FTP level are to protect data domain. Protect the data domain for anonymous FTP from any write permission. Nobody should be able to write something on the anonymous FTP. Only the owner should be able to do this. For example, an .r host file can be copied on victim system and later used to break in by means of subsequent R login attack. So this that from outside anyone can write on the FTP server. This need to be prevented. Then password data should be out of the reach of anonymous FTP service. That sounds trivial, but often if it's not correctly configured, it's not. It's possible. There are many data accessible via anonymous FTP. If configuration is not done in the correct way. Let's close this lecture and this example of this series of examples on attacks on the transport control level and attacks on the application level of the TCP/IP stack by looking to a few attacks on the voice over IP service. Voice over IP makes possible to use the internet and internet connections to make telephone calls, and it becomes more and more popular because it's cheap and works well. So the most well-known standard for such voice over IP services are the H.323 standard and the ZIP standard, the session initiation protocol. Because this ZIP protocol is very simple, much simpler than the H.323 protocol. It dominates the IP telephony market, particularly for the home users. ZIP works on the basis of a client-server architecture. And why the server is needed? The server is just needed to mediate between both participants. So the server is needed to bring them together. When both partners know each other and know that they want to call with each other, then the communication is done directly via the RTP protocol, via the real-time transport protocol, which is other. So the ZIP protocol is used to bring participants together. And only for that. If the participants know each other, then they have a direct communication, and do this, we make the communication with help of the RTP protocol. That means ZIP is used for signaling that to one participant that another participant wants to call him. So it's similar like the physical ringtone in a telephone system. And then to establish a connection, if the other partner is willing to accept the connection, and at the end to tear down this connection. For transporting the data, the RTP protocol is responsible. So what you can do data in form of audio, but you can also send video telephony, video data. So let's have a look to this voice over IP ZIP protocol. This ZIP protocol can easily be misused to perform denial of service attacks. And the idea is the following. By means of calls, and such calls are comparable to normal broadcast, the entire ZIP network can be put out of service. There is only one small manipulation of a ZIP packet. This is a ring all packet that is sent within a special tool, and that's enough to cause this denial of service. Then immediately all participants that are connected to the ZIP network, they get a ring signal and are thinking or assuming that there's anyone they want to call. So here you see this modified line if you go into more details. So this is one denial of service attack. The other is also with flooding of many packets. A voice over IP device can be put out of service. So this flooding, this broadcasting is stupid information that takes all the bandwidth of a network and brings the performance down. It is possible when we look now to the getting insight into the communication of two partners in such a voice over IP situation. Then another attack is to eavesdropping the RTP data. misusing of zip we discussed is, for example, manipulating the ring all package or others. And then, if there is a connection established, the RTP protocol is used to exchange data. So in the conventional telephone network, it's difficult. It's difficult to eavesdrop telephone calls because you need physical access to the distribution box, or you need physical access to the cables, and you need special devices to connect to the cables and to eavesdrop the signals. With voice over IP, this eavesdropping becomes much more easy, and telephone calls can eavesdrop much more in a simple way. So by default, the audio and speech is transformed unencrypted. So an attacker is able to sniff and reveal the RTP data by means of tools like RTP dump or RTP play. Because if people are not syncing and are not configuring, the data are sent in an unencrypted way, and there are tools, they are sent over the internet, so they are easily accessible, and by means of such tools, it's easy for an attacker to eavesdrop all the communication of the both parties. A secure transmission of speech can be achieved with a special variant of RTP protocol. This is the SRTP protocol, the secure real-time transport protocol. But to be able to use the encryption, an own IP, voice over IP device, as well as the voice over IP device of the communication partner, both need to have, and both need to run this RTP protocol. In a usual communication line with the same person, it's simple to say, you should establish, you should install this, and I install this SRTP protocol. But telephone situations are typically open, and there are calls from people that do not run an SRTP protocol, and then you cannot encrypt this. What is necessary to say that encryption becomes useless if an Trojan horse is located on the system that captures all the data before it's transported over the network. Because at the end, the data need to be decrypted, or the data, the real speech, need to be encrypted, and if it's possible to place here the Trojan horse, all the unencrypted data can be cached and can be sent to the attacker. Another last attack method I want to mention here is attacks against voice over IP service, is the eavesdropping of zip packets. So the devices that transferring the zip authentication data, which are needed by the gateways for the connection itself, to establish the connection, but more important for the provider for calculating the telephone bill. So if it's possible to attack this, then at the end, the attacker is able to perform calls without paying. Paying is done by another person. So if an attacker can capture authentication data, then he or she can use this identity to perform own calls for free with the respective provider. So to forge a telephone number identifier, it is not necessary to have foreign identity. By a small manipulation of the zip header, an attacker can simulate other callers. Small manipulation is enough of the zip header to be able to simulate other callers. So instead of phishing mails, also phishing calls are conceivable. Protection measures against this eavesdropping of zip packets is to prevent, or at least to make it complicate, to eavesdropping and manipulating data. There is also a secure version available for the SIG protocol. ZIP protocol, that's the ZIP-S protocol, the ZIP over SSL. So instead of ZIP, the ZIP-S protocol should be used. But also here you see in practice, this is not widely spread. So this finishes our tour through the transportation level to the application level with a lot of examples how to attack protocols, internet protocols, to later on get break-ins prepared or to perform denial of service attacks. So here it's only a few examples. There are much more much more examples known, much more attacks are known. So this should give you only a first insight, and it should show you that on each level, on each application, also protocol, there are attacks known. Thank you for your attention.